ministers, ambassadors, scholars and students, what a rare honor. I've been here as I was born on the fringes. Even some of the lectures were all on the fringe among the more radical students. But here, I'm given the rare privilege, thank you, Rector, to be at the center of a great institution whose restless intellect not only influenced France, but had its vibrations throughout the world. From the dialectical precision of Pierre Abelard in the 12th century to the change idealism of 1968, and I happened to be walking at the Latin Quarter and see the students of Sorbonne and the students in Paris demanding and clamoring for change and reform. This has never been a place for complacency. You challenge orthodoxy. You sharpen reason. You lead in quantum computing, climate sciences, and advanced mathematics. This speaks to a tradition at Sorbonne that does not flinch from difficult questions. And thanks to such progressive culture, La France is not just a catchphrase for frivolity. You have made significant strides in renewable energy, biodiversity initiatives, and environmental leadership towards a sustainable future going forward. In the arena of political philosophy and governance, I believe it is no cliché to say that Enlightenment thinkers such as Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu have profoundly sharpened modern democratic principles, even as we continue to be reminded of Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Not just empty rhetoric, it's habits of the heart that really matters. Can you imagine, you, the staff, professors, faculty, and students here, that these scholars I referred to had such immense, compelling influence to the art and policy of governance, to the principle of separation of powers. And I therefore cannot reiterate how delighted I am to be here at the center of excellence. Now, from Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir to Albert Camus, and I pronounce like the Englishman, not like the French, who, forgive me, absolutely son excellence ambassador. We drink from the fountain of profound insight into social justice and equality, while the fountain of French literary giants, far too many to enumerate here, provide the world with universal themes that cut across creeds and cultures. In short, the advancement of French civilization has significantly contributed across the broad spectrum of human endeavor. The rich tapestry of civilizational pursuits should serve as a foundation for the fostering of relations within France and, by extension, Europe and Southeast Asia, precisely, particularly ASEAN. The question then is, on what terms should this be conducted? You know, the foreign minister is here, ambassadors are here. We would like to know on what terms, what basis. Now, back in the 1990s, I did postulate in the Asian Renaissance the resurgence of Asia, and particularly in the context of ASEAN, about the region undergoing political and economic rebirth, drawing from its unique cultural identity and historical experiences. Today, the advancement of Southeast Asia may be gleaned from the trajectory of growth of ASEAN, which is no doubt a manifestation of the fruition of ASEAN economic integration. I would go as far as to liken the political changes that Southeast Asian countries have undergone a democratic metamorphosis. moving from authoritarian regimes to more participatory governance with democratic accountability. In some instances, even more democratic than some of the established systems. I wouldn't mention Europe or United States. In any event, this is a living testament to the healthy political processes and growth of civil societies in the region. This bodes well for political stability and governance. In that spirit, I put it to you that it is time for Southeast Asia. I put it to you, reminds me my umpteen and years of court cases. Always I put it to you, the attorney generals here. When they have a point, they say, I put it to you. And you don't have a choice but to say yes. So I put it to you that it is time for Southeast Asia and Europe to redefine the terms of our engagement as equals, as co-creators, as partners in a world yearning for balance. My meetings yesterday, including with Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, and later this evening with President Macron, form part of a deliberate journey to renew and rebalance ties between two regions bound by history, but not confined by it. Hence, to expand, to enhance, and to fortify. Few regions have felt the weight of today's uncertainty as acutely as Europe. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has not only shaken the continent's sense of security, but also its assumptions. Shaken the continent's sense of security, but its assumptions. What are those? About deterrence, dependence, the durability of peace. A war many thought impossible became a reckoning that shattered the illusion of permanence and reminded us that even in the heart of Europe, history still breathes. Europe finds itself grappling with uncertainty in its oldest alliance. As debates over military spending and collective resolve unfold, the balance of transatlantic compact is being tested in ways not seen for generations. Europe's gaze has turned eastward. Indo-Pacific strategies have taken shape, not only among European capitals, but also at the level of the Union itself. Among the voices shaping this vision of policy and diplomacy is President Macron's recent call for a new coalition for open trade, open dialogue, and a rule-based order which offers an insightful articulation of European role in Asia, one that is principled, cooperative, and forward-looking. We know that there was a time in the not too distant past that this pecking order was necessitated on the hallowed doctrine of mission civilisatrice, civilizing mission. I'm going to be a Sorbonne for a few weeks to pronounce rightly. That was proclaimed as justification for colonialism and imperialism. It was sacred because there was supposedly a moral duty to spread Western values, Western culture and civilization to non-Western societies. Today, while no claim to such patronizing pretensions will be forthcoming, nevertheless, the terms of engagement between Europe and Southeast Asia are yet to be fully calibrated. To be sure, we welcome partners, but we welcome them as equals, not as condescending collocutors, not as instrument for containment, not as a cover for anxiety, and not as projections of other people's wars and fears. We urge Europe to resist the impulse to universalize its predicaments and predilections, big or small. Our region, and ASEAN in particular, is not a geopolitical mirror to be held up in another's crisis. It has its own past, its own calculations, and its own form of restraint. Strategic clarity is just as essential in Asia as it is in Europe. But it must begin with the recognition of difference. Just as we resist fatalism of conflict, we must resist the cynicism that too often surrounds trade. For Southeast Asia and Europe to build a meaningful partnership, our economic engagement must be guided by the same principles we ask of security. What? Respect, flexibility, and restraint. Because in both arenas, security and commerce, the central question is the same. Do we act to impose, or we do understand to accommodate? Trade must be a bridge, not a barrier. No, let us be clear. We are not, and we do not ask for indulgence. We ask only that Europe meet us where we are, not where its models presume we ought to be. What we seek is not favors, but fairness, not exemption, but equity. If we are to conclude agreements of ambition and substance, they must be grounded not only in economic logic, but in mutual comprehension. No. Son Excellence, ladies and gentlemen, normally in universities you avoid the son excellence business because students don't like it. At least when I was a student, what excellence? Everybody is excellent. Okay. With due apologies to the ambassador. There are too many ambassadors here. I'll be outvoted. Now, in this city, in this great city of Paris, I was just singing in the car, I love Paris in the springtime, in the summer, and the winter. My God, all seasons of the year. And why do I love Paris? Because my love is here, right? Now, in this city, it was here. When I was in my first year at university, I learned about equality, fraternity. And fraternity was not a creation, it's not a new word, but it's a creation, the zeitgeist of the times that stood for decades and centuries. Now, fraternity was a moral proposition to the world. It asked us to see others not as strangers to be managed, but as equals deserving of dignity. It suggested that beyond sovereignty lies something deeper, solidarity. Yet today, that idea, fraternity, is strained. Across too many societies, fraternity ends at the age of identity. Islamophobia, at times coded, at times overt, has become in certain circles a socially acceptable prejudice. It manifests not only in policies, but in postures, in the quiet exclusion of Muslim voices, in the framing out of Muslims as permanent suspects in the story of the West. Viewed in this light, fraternity, therefore, is not merely an empty catchphrase, but expropriated to be used selectively in the pursuit of insidious racism and xenophobia. The French Marcel Proust, in English we say Marcel Proust, has shown us what is to be gathered and learnt in search of lost time. Let me struggle with the French. À la recherche du temps perdu. As long as you understand, khalas. The French understand what I'm trying to say? Yeah, poor pronunciation. You know, I learned the pronunciation from my driver. So if it is wrongly pronounced, it's not his mistake, but mine. Perhaps if we journey back to the 8th century AD, we could relearn some of them too. The research of lost time. I will not repeat in French. Now, as the story goes, while the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne and Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid were the righteous representation of their respective faith and thus were notionally enemies, nevertheless, there was cogent geopolitical and economic dictates that nudged them to walk along the path of amity and goodwill, transcending civilizational lines. Therefore, contrary to general notions, Christendom and Islam were never destined to be mortal enemies, except by the designs of those bent on conjuring a different impression by sowing discord and animosity. In his seminal work, Muhammad and Charlemagne, Henri Pirenne, the great historian, foresees that it is not for Islam, but if not for Islam, the Carolingian dynasty would probably never have seen the light of the day. The logical conclusion, therefore, is that without Muhammad, Charlemagne would be inconceivable. This postulation, which we know as the Pirenne thesis, flew against the general tide of opinion that the Dark Ages had been caused by the destruction of the Western Roman Empire by the barbarian invasion of the 4th and 5th centuries. Now, I will extend to geopolitics. Southeast Asia has been seen through borrowed lenses as a flank in a great power rivalry, a fulcrum of supply chains, a zone of contestation between forces larger than itself. We are used to be described, but we are less accustomed to be heard. This is not a call for special treatment. Let me reiterate this point. It is a call for consistency. If we claim to uphold universal values, then let them be universal. If we speak of liberty, and dignity, equality, they must extend to those who do not look, worship, or live like the majority. Nowhere in this is this more urgent than in Gaza. What is happening there is not merely a tragedy. It is a collapse of conscience, of empathy, of leadership, and the ability to distinguish suffering from strategy. We have seen schools turn to rubble, hospitals without power, families erased in seconds. When we fail to acknowledge the humanity in others, we risk losing our own. The statistics are not mere numbers. 20 dead, 300 killed, not numbers. For each represents a human story of mothers, children, parents, and the experiences should evoke not just sympathy, but a call to action in each of us. We speak of human rights. I hear continuous hectoring about democracy and human rights, and the imperative to protect the sanctity of life, and yet the global community appears to be powerless to put an end to this protracted genocide. The imperative for moral clarity extends to all. Unfortunately, what we witness is the double standards, the hypocrisy, and the moral haziness in how the world approaches the question of Iran. No one is above international law, but neither should any country be beyond dialogue. The selective application of norms tears away the very fabric of the rules-based order. Now, this is again about finding coherence. For without it, words like order, rules, justice begin to lose their meaning. And we are to rebuild trust across continents, across faith, and across histories. Europe and ASEAN, for example. It must begin with a renewal of that idea that dignity is not a scarce resource. It is indeed a shared inheritance. Let that be the basis of our engagement. Let it be the measure by which history will judge whether we rose to meet this moment without unwavering resolve and utmost courage, or decile from it, succumbing to divisiveness, despair, and passivity. Europe is of West, yes, and ASEAN and Asia is East. But the twain, unlike the famous Kipling couplet, the twain shall meet, not by denying our differences, but by transcending them with the courage of our conviction, affirming our commitment with that tenacity of purpose and determination, knowing that our efforts today will influence generations to come. Mercy, thank you.